donors.
No,
I don't know
no.
what it is. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to this session. I was getting a little concerned how we're going to combine snow leopards and Okapi, but I guess a lot of people get it here. We're talking about the ghost of the mountain and the ghost of the forest, so we do have a common theme here today. I'm John Lukas. I'm with the Okapi Conservation Project, and also I'm a board member at WCN. So I want to thank you on behalf of everybody for coming out today and supporting the Expo, and I hope you're having a great day. I was, talking to Rodney, and just, we've had similar careers in this field, both dealing with animals that you hardly ever see or never see in the wild, that the camera traps as our window into their behavior and their life, and also that we have recognized the importance of communities to work with to conserve these species in their natural habitat. So there is a lot of commonalities, and I think you'll notice that through our talks. We have on very long careers, but one thing we both have in common, we have very understanding wives, because this is a very difficult task. So it was with great honor that I introduce Dr. Rodney Jackson, the Snow Leopard Conservancy, a dear friend and member of WCN since our beginning days. He's dedicated 40 years of his lives to the conservation of the snow leopard across many states in its range. He's pioneered ways to conserve snow leopards, and over the last 20 years, he's really dedicated his programs to working with the local communities so they can find a way to coexist and benefit both the community and the snow leopard. So please help me welcome Dr. Rodney Jackson.
Thank you, John, and welcome, and thank you all for supporting wildlife conservation. So if you were to ask me 40 years ago what I would be doing, I would say I'd be in Africa. And I grew up there, I was born there, and I was going to go back and study the leopard. But something happened on the way. I got my degree at UC Berkeley, and I decided on the way back to Africa, I really wanted to see some mountains, because there are no mountains in Zimbabwe, or very few. And I went to the Himalayas, and I ended up in the most remote part of Nepal, I think, and I wanted to go on Sherpas. I heard about Sherpas. I went on a trek. Where did I go? To a snow leopard area. And I saw that snow leopards were obviously very shy. I never saw one, but people were hunting them because they were a threat to their livelihood. And I said, well, Africa has plenty of researchers. Maybe I should go back and I should look for money and study snow leopards. So a few years later, I was lucky enough to win the Rolex Award for Enterprise, which of course made all this possible. And this cat, I don't often see it, as John indicates. Maybe in my 40 years, I've probably seen it 45 or 50 times, but not much more than that. It's incredibly elusive, but boy, does it capture you. And this is my expedition way back in 1980s, early 80s. Snow leopards have never been studied before, and we picked, I think, a great study site in far western Nepal. We got money from National Geographic, so we were able to put the first radio collars on snow leopards and track them in a study that became a seminal study really for 20 years. It was the cover story, much to my delight and amazement really, in 1986, and it really brought attention to this rare cat that people have heard about that was endangered. But of course, the threats are always there, and they're still there. Back in those days, the big threat was fur coats being traded for a fur coat like that, $60,000 in Europe. It was fashionable to wear them. Nowadays, you can move ahead on the right there, you can see the snow leopard pelt. Well, those bones are very valuable for East Asian medicinal purposes, so they find their way there. So cats do have a lot of threats. One of the big challenges is that they live in such a vast area. 12 nations of Central Asia, you can see in this image. It's taken at night, so it's a satellite picture. All those white spots are city lights or town lights. And the most amazing thing, of course, is that snow leopards are in some of the least populated parts of the world, which really helps a cat, because that way the number of threats are a little more constrained. The people that live them are mostly pastoralists, and that we can deal with that. However, we do have a challenge that a lot of these countries, As you can look at this range in the orange area, you can see it's often along border areas. So one of the critical things we have to do is to work between nations, across nations, which is not an easy thing to do. The other problem with snow leopards is that they live in really high mountain areas. So I work anywhere from 10,000 feet to 16 or 17. In Mongolia, they go down to about 7, I guess. But you're always in steep country. The steeper it is, the happier the cats are, somehow. And after we did our study, my first 10 years or so of my career, actually, and this is back, I'm in my mid-30s, going on early 40s, was spent on training local people, local rangers, how to survey this elusive animal that nobody ever saw through two techniques in Bhutan, in Nepal, in Mongolia, Pakistan, and critical ranges. Ranges of national park people, because that's really where the core snow leopard areas were. However, I realized very quickly that parks people didn't always have the resources to go out, that the front line were the local communities, as you can see here. Now, this is a mass killing. This is a major murder sequence, I guess, where a snow leopard got into a livestock pen at night, killed the entire holdings of a family, their sheep and their goats, which is like their bank account being wiped out. Somebody broke into the bank and took all your money. Naturally, they look at snow leopards as an incredible pest. So how do we change this? And this is the rest of my life, and I think my career, the most satisfying part was working with local communities, with the individual herders like this guy, Tashi Langel, and his family, and by simply putting up a predator-proof corral, wire mesh over the roof, as you can see there, strengthen the stone wall, you can stop the snow leopard from getting into the pen at night when they're usually out hunting, and you stop this catastrophic loss. And immediately, the local community are far more willing to see and to coexist with snow leopards. They see them actually as assets if we take the big next step. And the big next step really is, how do you improve the income opportunities for these mountain people? So the average income probably in snow leopard range, and this would be in rural areas, is around $400 to $600 a year. And if we can bring in another $500, $1,000, you've really got a win-win situation, because now the family can send their kid to the good schools. And there are no schools that you can imagine in these remote areas. But they can go to the local town and get educated and have a good future. And with that has come a real change in snow leopards. Instead of being secretive, where you never see them, I see them once a year or something like that, now I can go to a particular reserve like Hemis, and in 7 days I can see them 4 or 5 times, sometimes from 50 yards away. So this is a dramatic change, and I really put this down to the local people. Well, there's a cat watching us. This is taken with a cell phone, believe it or not. So it's really, and not taken by me, but by one of the tourists who come out and look for snow leopards, and was very lucky to get close because this cat was on a kill. But this brings me to the next stage of my career. So 40 years helping study them and protect them, I realized that the real legacy, the critical challenge in this world today, is handing over to the next generation. These kids, this is an International Snow Leopard Day in Russia, in the Altai Republic, and we are showing them their traditional animal, their keystone animal that lives in the mountains that they never see, few people ever see, because it's shy, because it's been poached or hunted. We want them to be the next generation. And so I am really appreciative for WCN, because they've enabled me to work on this cat, to work with the communities, and now through the network that is being developed here, to train and engage the next series of conservationists. And as this cat walks away from us, I really want to make sure it has a good, strong future. And the best future is with some of the young people that I met. And I'm very delighted to be able to introduce one of our latest, Rinzin Lama, Punchuk Lama. He got his scholarship from WCN. Thank you, WCN, for that. He studied his degree in Germany, and now he's back in Nepal 3 months, and he's been working. So please help me welcome Rinzin.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Rodney, for the brief intro. I feel really great to be here.
No, I'll just go back.
I first saw a snow leopard when I was 17. I was walking down a gully, a valley, and then like next to the cliff, I saw a snow leopard. Basically, I didn't know those were a snow leopard. I saw two big cats, and then I was so scared. I picked up the rock, but I didn't throw at them, trust me. I threw it on the bush and like shouted very loudly just to scare them away. That was the first time I saw a snow leopard. And like it really fascinated me. It really surprised me that, and now I'm a snow leopard biologist, focusing my career for its conservation rest of my life. So I was born in an indigenous Buddhist community called Ninba. So Ninba literally means sunny valley. In the western Nepal, in the district of Humla. So Humla is the most remote part in Nepal, like virtually roadless, still not connected to the main national highway. So this is the village where I was born, grown up, and attended a local school. So when I was studying in grade 6, so the civil war in Nepal, led by the Communist Party of Maoists, was at its peak. So like every parent, my parents thought that it may not be very safe for me to be in the village. So they sent me to Kathmandu, the capital city of Nepal, like for the further study. So like this is the typical dress that our Ninba women wear. So after graduating from the school, I returned back to my hometown. And that was the first time that I encountered with the snow leopard. So during the time, I had chance to meet herders, interact, and then learn about the snow leopard and other wildlife. And that was the most important movement that really pushed me into the wildlife field. And then after that, I returned back to Kathmandu, and then because I already knew that I wanted to be a conservationist, so I joined Institute of Forestry, because forestry was only the program in Nepal that trained the conservationists. So I completed it well, and in the science in bachelor, we had to do a project work. So, but I didn't do my project work on snow leopard somehow. But I ended up starting this little tiny hair, pica, is one of the snow leopard's favorite snack. Yeah. So after graduating from the Institute of Forestry, Pokhara, so I returned back to my hometown again to do a first ever camera trapping survey of the snow leopard. So which ended up recording snow leopard in the region for the first time ever. So this was the picture we recorded during that time, and coincidentally, the picture was captured on July 28, which was my birthday. So that was a big surprise. So during the survey, we visited to herders, we recorded the livestock. We wanted to study how the conflict was. So we interviewed herders about the livestock loss, and then we found there is a serious conflict, and there was no measure taken to reduce the conflict. And then somewhere in my mind, I thought, okay, I should be doing something. I didn't promise anyone, but I had a feeling that, okay, I should do something. So this is the yak, the symbol of highland livestock husbandry. It's the most valuable livestock the people have in the highland of Nepal. So one of the reasons I found the snow leopard frequently predating upon the livestock was, the livestock and the snow leopard's prey, blue sheep, they often use the same area for grazing. So when they graze together, the livestock were always easy to kill by snow leopard. The other important reason was the herders. They live up in the mountain with the snow leopard are poor herders. They can afford to build a predator-proof corral, or they don't find the materials easily to build those corral. So that is one of the reasons snow leopard jumps into the corral and kill livestock. So in the picture, you can see a hoarder's camp with a very poorly fenced corral. As Dr. Rodney mentioned, so the situation is even more severe in case of the small stock like goat and sheep. The snow leopard would jump into the corral and kill each of everyone until there is no movement. So that is the most difficult situation, which often results in retaliatory killing of the snow leopard. That is why reducing conflict is one of the most important things in reducing the threat to snow leopard. So we have been doing lots of activities. I would say integrated approach to conservation. That is what I like to call integrated approach to conservation. So the key thing we are focusing on is on the hoarders' education, because they are the one who spend most of the time with the snow leopard. So they need to be educated about the importance of the snow leopard, the potential they can bring to the community through tourism. The second is helping them reduce the livestock depredation. So this in the picture is the fox light with the hoarders background. So this is the fox light. It's a flashing light. It has a automatic solar charge system. So it throws high rays rays in the mountain. As soon as it gets in the nighttime, it throws the rays in different color. So up in the mountain where there are no settlement, when the snow leopard sees such unusual lighting, they get a feeling, they get a feeling of human presence, or they just get scared of this light and they stop coming close to the livestock corral. So this is what the hoarders have, the biggest weapon, not to kill the snow leopard, but to push the snow leopard away. The second thing we are supporting is the predator-proof corral. Actually, between the pole, there is an iron mesh, actually. So to the most vulnerable hoarders, the poor and those who live in the most vulnerable, vulnerable to the snow leopard habitat, which are more prone to get attacked by snow leopard. So we have been supporting this predator-proof corral. This is a very good measure, actually. It makes 100% protection of the livestock at nighttime, but the cost of construction is a little bit more with this. The third thing we are focusing is the educating the school children, because they are the future of the society. So we have been focusing lots of program on school children to increase their interest in the field of wildlife conservation. So to promote them as a future conservationists and who can lead the conservation work in their community. So in the picture, my colleague Tashi Argale is demonstrating the camera trap handling to the school children. So this is the picture of the school children participating in celebrating the International Snow Leopard Day. So in addition to these activities, we believe not only just focusing on the people or the community or the hoarders living in the snow leopard range would help to protect the species. We also believe that the awareness should spread among the general public, so that people in a bigger number knows about the snow leopard. So that is why we have been running a radio program in Nepal. So perhaps the biggest ever radio program focusing on the snow leopard conservation awareness in Nepal. So in the picture, I'm handing the radio, shortwave radio, to the hoarders to listen, so that they can listen to our radio program, listen to the news, what is happening in the country, and they can produce some noise in the hoarder set. So it might help to deter the snow leopard. So apart from these conservation activities, we believe the research is one of the strong foundation in building the effective conservation measures. So we do a lots of livestock depredation studies. So what are the ecological factors that is really pushing snow leopard to kill livestock? Or we also study about the snow leopard population, the prey status, and then the habitat status. So in the picture, I'm interviewing hoarders about livestock loss. So this is inside the tent made out of the yak wool. So as you might be aware, winter is the best time to see snow leopard. But this is the most difficult time in the mountain that we get big snowfall. So we climb up several hours to get to the camera trap site to clean up the snow so that the camera works properly and keeps capturing the snow leopard. And the other thing we do is spending lots of time scanning through the binoculars, the spotting scope, to looking for the snow leopard. but hardly we could see any. It's not that easy. Sometimes, like we see us, most of the time we don't see it. And we also use the spotting scope to count snow leopard spray blue sheep. Now, like, I'm gonna take you to my project site. Hold your breath for a while. It's really thrilling. So this is the road to my project site, Manang Valley. The quality is not very good because I filmed it from my mobile phone. So this is from my recent trip to my field. So as snow leopard lives above 10,000 feet in the mountain, like the terrain they live, the climate they live is really extreme. So one of the most common problem or the common challenge that we feel while studying snow leopard is the logistic. Logistic is one of the most difficult thing. When we are in a high elevation survey, so we often have to carry all the food, equipment by ourselves. The other problem we encounter is the weather. In the mountain, the weather changes so quick. So it's sunny in the morning, and it might get snow in the afternoon. So that is what we have to deal with most of the time. So I'm going to share a small story on this. So it was in mid-October 2016 when we were doing a camera trapping survey. We're on our way back to our camp around 5 p.m. in the afternoon, and then we're crossing through a ridge at the elevation of 17,000 feet. And then slowly, the fog started covering the area. We keep on walking, and after a few minutes, it's all covered. We lost our visibility. We could hardly see 30 feet in front of us. We keep on walking, and we ended up in a very tall cliff. There is no way out. So we relaxed, we took a deep breath, and then we returned back. We decided, and I and my other two colleagues, we were together, and we decided to go back the way we come. By the time it was already dark, it started snowing, but we keep on walking. And then luckily, we found a landslide area. And we were familiar to this landslide area, and then we relaxed, and we knew that the landslide would lead us to the stream, and through the stream we could get to the campsite. So three of us sit together, and we decided, okay, let's slide down through the landslide. And then following the landslide for 40 minutes, we got to the stream, and then slowly we got to the camp at 10 p.m. at night, wet and weak body. So this is something we often deals with in the mountain while studying snow leopard. Is the terrain, because of the terrain. Regardless of all these challenges, the difficulties that we come through, there are big movement, or there are good movement to celebrate. The most important movement is when the snow leopard passed by one of our camera trap and leaves a selfie. Or the one when we see one live in the field, like this. So this is the photograph my colleague Tasiar Gale captured in our project site, Manang Valley. So you can see how well they are camouflaged with the environment. So he was also recently awarded with the Disney Conservation Hero Award. There's some more picture. So this is the snow leopard roving, and then scent marking. This is one of the common behavior of the snow leopard they do to mark their territory. Can you hear the sound? Yeah, this is called yelling because snow leopard doesn't roar like a lion or tiger. So in the winter, from February to late March, that is the mating time of the snow leopard. So in the picture, the female snow leopard is calling its male for the hangout, dating, to hang out. You understand what I mean? So these are some more pictures from our camera trap. The same more pictures. So this is at the elevation of, I think, around 18,000 feet. So while studying snow leopard, we get, other achievement also. So this is a picture of the Himalayan wolf we photographed in our project site. So the wolf was abundant in the valley before. That is based on our study, we found that wolf were abundant, but like they were killed and completely like gone from the valley because of the livestock predation. So that is one of the things like I worry about, which might happen with the snow leopard. So in the last 10 years, I had a chance to visit almost every snow leopard range in Nepal, throughout the whole snow leopard range in Nepal. I met hundreds of herders, I interact with them, and then I witness anger, frustration, those who lose livestock. And I also witness love, passion, those who really believe that this species should be protected. This elusive cat shouldn't go extinct. And the most important, I also met the herders who are really willing to participate in a bigger conservation campaign, given the help that, if we help them reduce livestock loss and help build alternative sources of income opportunities. So from my recent trip to the field, like I recall a sage from the herders on the use of the fox light in their words. Like after the use of this light, the snow leopard attack on the livestock at night time has gone down. So this has not only helped us reduce the livestock loss, but help us sleep better. So the changes are possible. Together we can make the change. With your support, our engagement, engaging the local community, herders, scientists, students, everybody, we can create a better future for snow leopard and the fragile mountain ecosystem. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod and Rinzin. We've got a couple minutes for Q&A if anyone has any questions. Yep.
Would it help to have guard dogs?
Yeah, we tried with that. The problem is, like they don't really live off. In the winter, they just run away and ended up being feral dogs. That was the big problem.
I've got a question over here.
Yes, I was curious about the pikas. I hadn't really heard about them being an important part of snow leopard diets. I thought it was mainly the sheep.
Yeah, it does actually. Pika, it doesn't make a big portion of the snow leopard diet, but it is one of the, one of the easy source of the secondary prey.
When we were working I'll just add a little to that.
Yeah.
When we worked in the Langu back in the 80s, we found a lot of small rodents actually in snow leopard prey. And I was really nervous to report this because, this wasn't known that a big cat like that could snack off such small things.
I'm wondering about, it looks like the behavior is they'll go into and kill all of the livestock in a place. So then is that not out of hunger? I mean, what is the behavior where they kill everything, but they certainly can't eat it all?
This is called surplus killing, and it happens because the hunting, the detection of prey is separate from the killing instinct. And when a snow leopard gets in a livestock enclosure, of course the livestock can't run away. Naturally they will all run away and the leopard just gets one. So the cat's instinct to kill was because something's running around it is just repeatedly triggered, and it's totally exhausted at the end of an event like that, and often just lies down. And the commotion brings the herder out. The herder sees all these dead livestock in the pen, the cat's in the pen, and sometimes they used to stone it to death. But they all report that snow leopards are bloodsuckers because they see, the throat bites on all these animals and no meat taken. Well, this is a totally unusual situation, obviously, so predator proofing really does eliminate this.
I would add small on this. Snow leopard, they don't really like disturbance. That is what I feel like, like when they are killing, if they disturb, they just keep on killing. Because they don't want any, all the other livestock to move when they are killing one.
Got a question over there?
I was wondering, do you guys use drones to find snow leopards? Or that's a kind of bizarre question.
We could, but we haven't really tried yet. We could. That's a really good point.
So we do have actually a plan for Mongolia to use a drone, because the big critical gap with snow leopard conservation and research is how much prey is out there, how do we censor it, because they live in, they just run away as soon as they see people. And what we want to do is develop a drone with a temperature thermal sensor that we can fly and then be able to count the heat signatures. It would also enable us to go over livestock, free-ranging livestock, so we get a sense of the herds that are not brought back into the livestock pen at night and get a good idea of what the prey base is. With scat analysis, so genetics is really wonderful. You can take a scat of a snow leopard, you can tell its gender, you can get who's it related to and some history on the population structure in the area, but you can also get the diet. And what we really want to know is how much livestock do snow leopards eat versus wild prey. And I think what we're going to find out is going to be a very interesting thing, that the herders are heavily subsidizing the existence of snow leopards. So our next challenge is, well, we recognize that, we need to come out with that, but how do we incentivize them for tolerating some loss? And I would hope things like improved livelihoods would be one way of doing it, training, getting their kids better opportunities. So a lot of challenges lie ahead, and it's going to fall, obviously, to the next generation primarily. So I'm really excited about recruiting as many snow leopard conservationists in the different countries as possible and setting up networks so that they're communicating with another. Like, I think one of the finest things of WCN has been this networking capacity.
All right, one last question over here, and then we'll have to wrap it up.
In one of the photographs, there was a picture of a Pallas cat. Do they coexist easily with the snow leopards, and are you sighting them on your cameras?
No, the wolf,
Pallas cat.
what did you say?
The Pallas cat and snow leopard. in the
Like
same
they
area.
do occur in the same habitat, but like I think like Pallas cat avoids snow leopard because the bigger predator is always superior.
Thank you, Rod and Rinzin.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you,
Thank you so much.
everybody. Appreciate your support. So it is my great pleasure to introduce John Lukas. I was the second conservationist brought on by WCN. John was already there, being on the board. John already working on an animal in Africa, as he mentioned, a very elusive animal in the forest. And I think we have a lot of things in common. I think okapis are very hard to see, snow leopards are very hard to see, but I really admire John because he has an added problem. He has the issue of working in a country that is in conflict, where there's a lot of weapons around, automatic weapons, that can be obviously very destructive, where it not only affects wildlife, but it's affecting the social structure of the fabric of the community. And so I really welcome John Lukas, who I think lessons from John go across all sorts of species. He really has worked, I think, for the best of bringing science and community conservation together. So please welcome John Lukas of the Okapi Conservation Project.
Thank you, Rodney. I'm pleased today that Lukas and Meers, our program officer, will be joining me for part of this presentation, but I do want to let you know that we have a great, phenomenal Congolese staff in the Congo. And every year I try to get them a visa to the United States, and it's not possible. I was in Kinshasa, the capital, in August, went to the U.S. Embassy, and trying to find a way for us to get some of our people to be able to come to WCN. But it's just the number of Congolese people that do not return after getting a visa in the United States is one of the highest, and the U.S. Embassy is really resistant and reluctant to issue. Even they've told me stories about somebody vouched for this person. He's a doctor, he's a lawyer, he's the most fantastic person in the world. He's definitely going to come back, and he doesn't come back, and that's one of the issues. So hopefully we keep working this in one of these years, and hopefully next year we're going to have one of our great staff members here to present with us. The title of my talk is about in a crisis zone, and and people say, is this a war zone? No, a war zone has armies and defined enemies, and this is a place where there's lots of different groups that have no reason to exist but to create chaos for their own personal gain. So it's not a war zone, it's a crisis zone. I want to start today because everybody asked, why are we working with Okapi? And I think some of these facts here, just to keep in the back of your mind, is the reason we work with Okapi, not because I like them and they're beautiful and they're fantastic and they're mysterious, but only 2% of the global biomass, terrestrial animals, are wild animals. 98% of the global biomass are humans and are domestic animals. That's huge. You see on here, rainforests make up 6% of the Earth's surface. Over 50% of the species are found there. And rainforests are the most competitive places on Earth. The competition has created numerous numbers of different remarkable life forms, plants and animals. And to save biodiversity, you have to save forests. It's just remarkable that the amount of life is there, and we're fortunate the Okapi is the symbol of the rainforest of DR Congo. The range of the Okapi is limited to northeastern Zaire. There's a small population on the Congo River goes through here. There's a small population south of the Congo River. There are evidence that they did once occur into Uganda in the Semliki Valley, in this area around the Virunga Mountains. There you did, but they are no longer found there. So it's a unique endemic species to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. This country is one of the mega diversity countries by CR. It's got tremendous life. It's the most biodiverse country in Africa, leads the African countries in number of species of mammals, birds, reptiles, plants, far exceeds them. And Henry Morton Stanley was crossing through here in 1888. He surmised before he was crossing through the Ituri Forest, this place must hold the marvels of Africa. That was before mountain gorillas were found, and Okapi were found, and Congo peafowl, a number of different species in this place that nobody had ever seen before. This is a rainforest. It's huge. This is 68% of the tropical forests in Africa are found in DRC, 13% of the global biome. 125 billion tons of carbon are stored in its forests. This is a closed canopy forest in that you really can't see the sky. This is where Okapi live. They're the only ungulate that depend entirely on understory foliage for their existence. So Okapi are kind of unusual in that they're big animals, and they have great sense of hearing. You see those ears, great sense of smell, so getting close to them. But I always wonder why they were so big. They're 600-800 pounds. A lot of forest animals are small. But they have to walk through this forest every day for kilometers and kilometers getting leaves. And I've tried to walk through this forest without a pygmy with a machete. I'm not getting very far. And they just take their big, strong chest and they just push their ways through the forest, eating leaves as they go. So their size is important for collecting foliage. So we put camera traps out in 2016, and this was the first video of an Okapi eating in the wild. They eat over 100 species of leaves, and they just walk and eat leaves. A lot of these leaves have toxins, so if they have 3 or 4 leaves from one plant, they have to stop and go to another one because the toxins from that leaves, if they eat too many, will make them sick. So they're constantly buffering their diets from one to the other. The other unusual thing about Okapi, they live in an area of forest where there's a high population of leopards, and for millions of years they've co-evolved, so their biology is to avoid leopard predation. The Okapi communicates with infrasound. We listen. So this is an infrasound recording boosted to our hearing range, but we can hear it. And this travels below our hearing range and that of leopards. So it's how Okapi communicate in the forest, the young and to each other through this dense. Forest elephants do this, also black rhinos and several other forest species that have to communicate. And the young are born quite small. They get into a nest, and they get in this nest and they stay in this nest for 2 to 3 months, just coming out to nurse 4 or 5 times a day. The mother will never go near the nest. She uses infrasound to call the baby out. The baby nurses and goes back to the nest. This way, the chance of a leopard finding this baby are very slim, and the baby does this. They don't defecate for 60 days. They don't create the meconium, the first defecation, normally in mammals is in 1 day, 60 days. So this is not to bring any scent to itself when it's really vulnerable. They grow very fast. The mother has very high fat milk, and for a big animal, by 6 8 months, they're 3/4 grown. That's to get above the level that the leopards can prey upon them. So the Okapi is an old mammal species. They lived in Africa for about 7 million years, and they went undiscovered by Western science until 1901. And that's when the first Okapi skin was identified and went to Zoological in London. This was a giraffe species, a forest giraffe. It lived in a rainforest, quite unusual. And guess what Western science did? The first thing we do, we have to collect for all our museums. This is a museum in Paris. Every museum had to have this animal. And what I think, this is an animal nobody imagined existed. So you can imagine the excitement about this animal when it was first discovered. How can an animal like this live in the middle of the rainforest looking like this? And so people had to have it. Because of the demand for zoos, the first animal went to Antwerp Zoo in Belgium in 1919. The first captive birth was 1957. So it took a long time to figure out their biology in the zoo setting. The Belgians, monopolizing the country of Belgian Congo, set up this Pulu station in the middle of the Turi forest, And this was a place where they had Okapi that they distributed to, mainly to Antwerp in Belgium, their own zoo, and then this was, from there they went to the zoos of the United States and rest of Europe. In 1961, an independence, this station was destroyed during the Congolese independence from Belgium, and it left abandoned. And so in 1987, we had a contract with the country of Zaire at the time to rehabilitate this station and to bring awareness of the Okapi to the Congolese people and to the world. This station was really meant to set up to showcase the Okapi to the people and to the world, and also to encourage tourism and to create this center, which was known for a long time in Congo. I went to the Congo because of the Okapi, but I fell in love with the people and the place. The Mbuti Pygmies are phenomenal culture, caring, loving, friendly, and just amazing people. And working with the Okapi is really important because in Congo it's very important. It's been protected since 1933. It's a symbol of their national parks and their protected areas on the patch from one of the rangers in the Institute in Congo for the Conservation of Nature. So this is very important that, you know, we want to conserve this animal in the West, but we don't know much about it. And people come to our table and never heard of an Okapi. That's one of the most comments we ever heard. You can go to any 2 or 3 year old kid and above in Congo and they'll tell you what an Okapi is. They can show you an Okapi. And the reason is because Okapi are everywhere. You know, Okapi waters, Okapi construction, Okapi cigarettes, Okapi logistics. Radio Okapi is the #1 news source in DRC, print, media, and radio, and in internet. So it's really well known. So it's to build awareness and to have people care about this animal is not that difficult. And that's what we need. We have to build a critical mass of people caring about it. We started this project. No area was set aside to protect Okapi. So in 1992, the Okapi Wildlife Reserve was created with the help of partners, and at that time, the government of Zaire. It's 14,000 square kilometers, about 1.5 times the size of Yellowstone National Park. And it's a tremendous forest system, 1/5 the Ituri forest in Africa. It not only protects the Okapi, it protects the Mbuti Pygmies' way of life. They live and need the same as the Okapi. Another remarkable thing about this area has the highest population of chimpanzees, forest elephants, buffalo, and Okapi in the whole country of DRC. It's actually the largest density of primate species. 17 primate species occur in this forest. When I was there in May and June. I looked up one day and there were 6 different species of monkeys in the trees above me. And not just one, there was large groups of 6 different species, which is really unheard of when you see that kind of diversity in the forest at different trophic levels. Some even lower in the tree, middle of the tree, high in the tree, some on the ground, just amazing. So the Mbuti Pygmies share the forest with Okapi. They've been in this forest about 40,000 years. These are the smallest people on Earth. The men are about 4 feet 8 inches tall, the women about 4 feet 3 inches, and these are net hunters. They hunt their game by stringing nets between trees and have their dogs and women and children drive the game into the nets. You can see the man here with a spear. The animal hits the net, they spear it. It's usually small duikers, small antelope. Okapi are too big, they go right to the nets. The buffalo go right to the nets. So it's usually the small game that they're after. And I've been on hunts with them, and they kill one animal, done. Roll up the nets, go back and throw the animal, just take the whole animal and throw it on the fire. And that's what they do. That's how they're subsistence hunting. They only hunt what they need. They have no refrigeration. They have no way of keeping anything fresh. So when you have enough to feed the village, you stop. There's nothing else you can do with the food. These are nomadic, moving through the forest as nomadic hunter-gatherers. They set up a camp like this. And this is important for Okapi because they're at this camp for a couple months. When they leave this camp, all the tree shoots come up from the ground. And this is forage for Okapi and Bongo and other forest dwellers because this is a clearing in the forest they made, but they're only there for a short time and then it recovers. So this is a natural mosaic. The trees are too tall for Okapi to feed in most of the forest. You need tree falls, you need clearings, you need openings to create the food for the Okapi they can reach. So we have 2 pillars to our program. One is protection of the land. The other is working with the communities to create a sensibility about protecting the forest for the Okapi. The ICCN is the government agency responsible for protecting the forest of this reserve. The government does not have enough money to pay them, so we pay them. Getting around is very difficult. The rainforest, it rains a lot, and then roads get muddy, they get impassable. The infrastructure is not very well maintained, so regularly overloaded trucks will take a bridge out, and sometimes this could take 3 months repair, sometimes a year. So we have little barges set up bringing everybody back and forth across the river in the meantime. So our support for the Rangers is very critical. These are all holding Thuraya satellite phones for communication. We provide their base salary, their health care for their families, their rations on patrol, and their bonuses. And the bonuses are important because we have to motivate. This is a dangerous job. It's a very dangerous job. There's men out there with guns. They are in this forest. How do you get people to go out into this forest and risk their lives? First of all, they're very brave and they're very dedicated to their jobs. But the second thing, they get paid by the days in the field, how many snares they collect, how many weapons they collect, how many arrests they make. So this motivates them. And the Thuraya phones send out signals where they are. They send back to headquarters. So everything's recorded so we can pay the guards appropriately and motivate them to be out there. This is some of the statistics for the Rangers. We have about 85 Rangers that can patrol the reserve, and we have an issue with 7 patrol posts from which they go, and you can see they walked 15,130 kilometers last year just on patrol, and this is each patrol. Each patrol is about 4 or 5 Rangers and a porter. 2015 class of Ranger, we had 4 women. These are our first 4 women Rangers. They're still on the job. They're still working hard. I was there. They're tremendous. And we're in the process of training 50 new Rangers right now, and we're trying to get more women to join on this next recruitment class because these 4 did a great job, and I think they're a great example for the other women. There's very little jobs for women, and this would be a good job for them because we besides the patrols, we have checkpoints along the road, other places they can actually be very helpful in protecting the wildlife along the road and other issues. This is a conflict zone, and it's very hard to picture this till you're there because everything looks pretty normal, so it's not. And that's just what a conflict zone is. It looks normal, then it's not. Bullets start flying, why, where it's coming from. This just happens. A lot of these groups just have no reason but to just create chaos, for that way they allows them to undertake their illegal activities by creating chaos. So it's really a difficult situation. This little cute bugger here is the cause of a lot of the problems we have in the Okapi Wildlife Reserve. That ivory is forest elephant ivory. It's denser than savanna ivory. It's worth more than savanna ivory. It's very sought after, and the poachers are heavily armed. And this is something that a lot of the politicians and corrupt military officials are involved in directing these poaching games for ivory. So it's more of a political minefield as well as a dangerous place in the forest to occupy. Snaring does occur on Okapi. There is occasion we get an average of maybe 2-3 skins a year. We confiscate in different areas, not just in reserve, but in the huge area around us. But picking up snares is the way. Okapi get accidentally snared. That's the only way they usually probably die, is accidentally snared. And so picking up snares, walking, is the best way to protect them. In our area, we're, I would say, somewhat fortunate. Only about 15% of the snares are wire. About 85% are rope and twine, and Okapi can break them. So the wire snares are the more dangerous snare for Okapi, buffalo, and other large animals. Mining is one of our most serious issues right now. This is an area, it's phenomenal how much gold is in the ground in this area. When Mobutu was dictator, he had this as a mining zone, and no people were allowed in this whole area. We created the reserve. It was actually pretty easy to create the reserve because nobody was allowed because they knew there were so many minerals. So this is an open mine. The issue with mining is the miners and the middlemen that process the gold are come to live in the forest, and they have to eat. And the bushmeat trade will just explode around these mines. So the way to control bushmeat is to close the mines. Over 15,000 miners have been evacuated by the Rangers over the last couple of years. We have a pretty, I would call, on purpose, very fair system for removing miners. The first time they're just removed, out. If they come back, then their goods are confiscated. If they come back the third time, they're arrested. So really, we don't want to create an enemy. The miners are just poor people trying to make a living. And we know that. They come from far and wide. The idea is we want them to go back to where they came from, not stay here. You can mine lots of places outside the reserve. Just don't want you to mine inside the reserve. So the system, we've had not conflict about this, but the people that are in these military, semi-military groups, they try to get money from all these miners, and that's how it is. We talked about this a few times. I've been here, people. We had a very bad attack on our station in 2012, and this was in retaliation to the good job the Rangers were arresting poachers, closing down gold mines, and the Mai Mai militias that were involved there retaliated, attacked station, killed the people, killed Okapi, we had the station. But I have to say we've done a great job with support from our donors, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. All the facilities have been rebuilt. This is the headquarters for ICCN. And then all tourist facilities, everybody says, well, how can you have tourism? Well, you know, we can't have tourism, but it's important to have the potential because the communities get 25% of the revenue from tourism. We have to show them that this is a serious occurrence that could happen in the future, and we want to make sure of the facility. We do have some tourists that come through, very brave ones now and then, but we have the facilities. We have guard posts around the reserve. Zungaluka Post is on the eastern part. It's the eastern entrance to the reserve. It's one of the most important ones. This was attacked in January 2015 and destroyed. We rebuilt all the guard housing. We built just finished a new guard office, and this is an immigration checkpoint. This gate is very professional. The rangers are very professional. We want to give this when people come to this river, we've got to realize it's well managed, it's well operated. So having really nice facilities is important to send the message. There's people here who know what they're doing. Since the last issue we had in the reserve, we've had great securities improvement. I was there in May and June, just recently after the British tourists were kidnapped in Virungas, and they were ransomed and released. And the government was really worried about me being there. So I had an armed vehicle in front of me. You can see this vehicle here. These are Congolese soldiers, heavily armed. And this is these Indoro cattle coming down from CR, which is another problem. But you can see these are two rangers, how heavily armed they are. So we got heavily armed rangers. We have Army, and the issues in reserve have been really brought under control. The Army has really made an effort to arrest poacher. They kind of say that closing mines is not their responsibility. That's not their responsibility. That's the rangers' responsibility. But poaching, people that are killing animals, that's their responsibility. So they've been going, and I talked to a few of the colonels there, and they've been getting people, they've been arresting people, they've been doing a good job. The other pillar of our program is community. We have 50,000 people living around this reserve that have to eat, have to take care of their children, have to educate them, and we have to listen to them. And the reason we provide this we work with the communities because we have to have dialogue with them. If we don't have dialogue, we cannot teach them anything. We don't have dialogue, we can't change anything. So working with them and listening to them and addressing some of their needs. We have 4 education offices around the reserve because the road getting around is so difficult. If you just look at this road, the guys spend days and days on motorcycles going to 37,000 school children we reach 2 to 3 times a year, bringing the message of hope and sustainability to them. We have a protected animal poster program. The Mbuti pygmies can hunt sustainably, but they can't hunt protected species. But they don't know what's protected. They've been hunting in this forest for 4,000 years. How do they know what's protected and not protected? To them, they're all the same. But if they can see this, you educate and talk to them, they actually do listen, and they actually do cooperate because they just want paying attention to their needs and also paying attention to what they do for a living is really important to them. So in recognizing their rights. Our educators talk to the children and meet the children. We talk about sustainability, forest biodiversity, all kinds of issues with wildlife conservation, and it's a really important program. And the kids, exciting the kids, helping the schools, and our educators work under a principle called children are message multipliers. There's no TV here, there's nothing. Kids come home from school and they just talk about what they learned at school today, and the parents are sitting around, everybody's cooking the meal and sitting around outside playing. So the kids talk about everything all the time that they're learning in school. So this is how we get to the parents, is through the kids. It's hard to get the parents to come around and listen, but the kids, and they go home and they talk, so it's great for that. So kids are encouraged to interact with the adults, and that kind of is really in this culture. It's really great. The kids can interact and say whatever they want to say. It's really nice. So the reserve is a reserve. It's not a national park. No people were moved out to create this, so we have zones for certain activities. The light color are agricultural zones, the tan color are Mbuti sustainable hunting zones, and this is a central zone which no human activities are allowed and all wildlife is protected. That's recent. Over the last 4 years, we created a central zone with support from the communities. Agriculture, slash and burn agriculture overall is the most threatening thing to all wildlife in the forest and especially to Okapi. No trees, no Okapi. No trees, no elephants, no chimpanzees. So the communities develop these agricultural zones. We work with them, they design them, they lay them out, we protect them. There's blue markers going through the forest, setting off forest zone on one side, agricultural zone on the other. And these are very effective because the community is involved in doing that. And this is agroforestry is how we help them. This is a way we give them ways of crop rotation, new crops, and these are lucerne trees between the rows right here. They're nitrogen fixing. So the problem with rainforest soils, they're very impoverished. 1 year, you got to move on. 2 years at the maximum you get. Now you can get doing this 5 to 7, 8 years in the same plot of land, and you can come back to it in 1 or 2 years instead of 15 years. So this really reduces the need to cut forests to grow food. They can grow more food on less land and do it for a longer period of time. We have tree nurseries. We have 5 of them. 2 of them were supported by WCN donors the last couple of years, and these are native trees we grow and give to farmers. Last year, 50. Our goal this year is 60,000 trees delivered to farmers to be planted for fruit, nuts, and fruit trees, also rainforest trees around the schools. And women are important. They're our biggest stakeholder. Women are responsible for getting the resources, the firewood, the water, the food, maintaining a household. You have to reach the women in power. This woman has 10 children. And she doesn't want to have 10 children, but she has to have 10 children. Somebody has to get the firewood, has to get the water, somebody has to clean the house, somebody has to watch the other kids, someone's got to help cook the food. That's why they have a lot of kids. They need the help to survive in this environment. So we have women's groups that try to empower women to have sustainable income. These women's groups have, we provide them with sewing machines for cloth, and they sell these in the market. They do, a number of our women's group have the contracts to make school uniforms, 2 sets of uniform for each kid in the school, 37,000 kids. That's a lot of uniforms. So this is a really good source of income. Right now, we're just finishing this new building. This is for the women's group to meet in, because they usually meet outdoors, and if it's raining, they can't meet. This way they can meet, do their sewing, do everything like that. They also they do cooperative farming, which is also very important because they can produce surplus crops to pay for school fees and healthcare needs. Every time we ask the community, what's your greatest needs, they always say healthcare. Healthcare is their number one concern, is healthcare, because the diseases and the deaths and the suffering is really bothers people. So we support 20 rural health clinics plus a major clinic in Apulu. And clean water is another thing that's very important. About 90% of human diseases can be alleviated with clean water. So we have built these water sources, again, with help from WCN donors around the reserve. So I'm going to turn it over now to Lukas, who's going to talk about some of the exciting things we're doing with our camera trap program. And Lukas went over there with me and helped set these up a few years ago, and so he's going to do that right now. So I introduce Lukas Meers, Program Officer.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Can you hear me? So John took up a lot of the time. I will try and make this pretty expedited. But like John said, I went over there with him about a few years ago to go set up our camera trapping program, and it was a major culture shock. I do travel a lot. I am fortunate enough to be able to go around the world to various places, but this was the biggest culture shock that I've ever experienced in my life. We arrived, went through immigration. That was intense and scary. But then everywhere we went, we always had armed guards following us. Every time I went to the bathroom, when we went to bed, there was always an armed guard there just as added security. So this is the habitat that Okapi live in. It's very dense, very difficult to do population surveys. We really don't have much of an estimate on their overall throughout their entire range on the population, but within the Okapi Wildlife Reserve, there's about 3,500, and it's a relatively stable population. It's rare to actually see an Okapi in the wild. Our rangers, ICCN rangers, will walk an average of about 500 kilometers before they see their first glimpse of an Okapi, and this is typically what they see, a blurry animal that's walking away, and that's it. Currently, the population estimates are done via dung counts, and Rodney was actually talking about the benefits of collecting information from dung counts. You can also get population estimates and determine the density of the species, but it's long, laborious, exhausting, and you have to have that security, that added security with the armed guards with you to do these surveys. They can take months at a time. So what we did a few years ago was bring camera traps over. We actually, because of the difficulty of getting into the country, we actually have to sneak the camera traps in a little bit. And so we would hide them in our T-shirts and stuff to bring some over. So we only have about 25 camera traps over there now, and every time we go over, we bring a few more. So we trained our Congolese staff in setting up these camera traps, and they had a blast walking in front of the camera traps, acting like Okapi. It was quite hilarious. Everyone was laughing, having a great time. And it did take a few trial runs to actually get the cameras up and running. Here's our team Okapi. This is our team that actually goes out and sets up the camera traps. We typically have a few armed guards for the added security. We have a pygmy guide and then 2 of our Okapi Conservation Project staff that actually help set up the cameras. We have the added security with the guards. The pygmy shows are the ones looking for Okapi signs, and we set up the camera traps where we actually see signs of Okapi like dung. But once the camera traps are set, we can leave them, and then they just collect data every time something walks in front of them. And so about every week, we have pygmies actually check on the camera traps to make sure that they are functioning, that they're not stolen or anything like that. So here is a pygmy woman actually explaining to someone off camera how a camera trap works. So they're actually sharing that message of the whole camera trap study, carrying a little baby. And so we first started off with getting still images, and this is an image of 2 Okapi together, which is very, very rare. We think that this, the one in the back, is a young male, and we believe that this is his mother. He has not been weaned fully off of her yet, but it's very rare to see 2 Okapi together unless it's a mother-calf pair or if they are mating, if it's a male-female. We'll also get unique identifying marks. Each Okapi has stripes that are identified by, or their individual unique patterns, just like our fingertips. But this one here has a leopard scar, you can see that. Adults can typically escape leopard attacks because they'll just charge through the forest and the leopard falls off, whereas calves will actually succumb to them and actually be killed. And then we recently went into collecting video footage. So I have a series of 10 to 20-second clips. And this is typically what we get. An Okapi standing, chewing, and that's pretty much it. But then here you'll see a unique, they're very sensitive to sound. And so she heard something and then darted off. And here's something very, very special. This has never been documented before. Here we have a female Okapi walking in front of the camera trap. And then if you look at the timestamp at the bottom, just 4 minutes later, there's a male following right behind. Female are only in estrus for a few days, and so they have to mate during that period of time in order to get pregnant. And then you can see her distended abdomen. Here's a pregnant Okapi, just chewing and eating, as they always do. There was at one point where I was analyzing our camera trap footage, and I think I had 3 hours of a single Okapi standing in front, and it was just like twitching, and that just kept setting off the camera trap. And so I had 3 hours to analyze. But yes, but I did get some unique behaviors. So what do you hope for after you see a pregnant Okapi? Yes. So in early February this year, we captured the first ever video of an Okapi calf in the wild. Oh, they're miniature versions of the adults, and they're the most adorable things in the world. They are born with a little mane down their neck, and they lose that as they get older. They are the fastest growing ungulates in the animal kingdom, and the female will increase her feeding by 50%. She'll eat 50% more leaves because she's actually giving the nutrition, the nutrients, and the fat to the baby to help them grow much faster. We were also able to collect a lot of symbiotic behaviors. And if you see, here's the Okapi. You'll see little birds down here once the Okapi starts moving. This is a symbiotic behavior that's never been documented with Okapi before, similar how cows or cattle will walk through the plains or any other hoofstock. There's the bird. Will stir up insects, and so the birds start feeding on the insects. But then we also get a lot of information of other animals that share the same habitat. Okapi Wildlife Reserve is home to about 4,500 individual chimpanzees. It's the largest population of chimpanzees in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And then we also get forest elephants. This was the first video of forest elephants ever captured in the Okapi Wildlife Reserve. And there's a little surprise at the end. I think I just ruined it. Little calf. Aww. Pretty adorable. And so then you get other unique species like bats. I just wanted to share this because bats are cool. And you wouldn't expect to get them. They just happen to land on that branch right in front of the camera trap. Oh, and then one day we noticed that all of our pineapples were missing in our garden. We decided that this guy can keep the pineapples. We don't want to. He did leave the eggplants, though. And so what do we do with all of this information? First and foremost, we share it with the communities, because the communities are our biggest partners and the most important part of this whole project. Because the Okapi are so reclusive and secretive, the local people never see them in their native habitat. So we share this footage with all the local people to instill excitement, passion for their national animal. It's kind of like their bald eagle. Everyone knows what an Okapi is, like John was saying. We also use it to collect data, to get baseline population data to understand densities. But we also want to share this with the world. And so we created World Okapi Day in 2016, and it's on this coming Thursday. Mark your calendars. And so we first started by reaching out to zoos around the world that actually house Okapi, because typically you can only see an Okapi in a zoo because they're so secretive and it's so difficult to get into DRC. We are selling these shirts at our table if you want some Okapi stripes. And then last year we actually expanded into the reserve. And we actually had zoos around the world sponsor individual villages within the Okapi Wildlife Reserve. And sport really resonates with people. So we worked with the schools to select people to compete in sports. And we held races in 4 villages around the reserve. And this year we're expanding to 5 villages. It was so popular the first year, there were about 15,000 people participating and watching all of these races. It was a much bigger turnout than what we expected, and we are expanding it even more this year. And I'm going to pass it on to John to close. Sorry.
So that's, working there is difficult, but the Okapi has been classified as endangered, and its decline, it just parallels the civil disorder in the Congo. In 1997, we probably had 50,000 Okapi. Today, maybe 10 to 15,000. The decline just parallels the lack of civil order and the lack of ability to protect Okapi across this range. So this has helped us get the word out, and we've actually been able to use the endangered status to help increase our number of grants we can apply for. But the working with the Okapi has allowed us to, it's a flagship for the area, but also it allows for a unique human culture to thrive, and also for unique species like pangolins and other animals that are protected under the umbrella of this Okapi Wildlife Reserve. Just in closing, and say, not all doom and gloom. This is President Kabila burning ivory. And just a quick story, I know we're running out of time, but cut it off, but I was just saying, I saw all the ivory in the head of ICCN's office, and he was showing me all this ivory he had confiscated. I said, why don't you burn it? He says, I'll mention it to the president. He mentioned it to the president, and 2 weeks later, it's President Kabila burning ivory for the world to see. And it's a good statement for the country to start like that. So. Thank you for your time, and I guess we have, for how many, one question, Joyce?
If you have any questions for John and Lukas, please go find them at their table. Thank you very much.